So today we are starting our Unit 6, which Unit 6 has to do with everything with circles. So real quick what I'm going to do, and what you're going to do is you're going to follow along inside your notes here, and I'm just going to go off of some vocabulary here. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is basically what exactly is a circle. So a circle is all points that go around a center. So every single circle you're going to be dealing with has a center, which is the very middle of the circle. And then all around this circle, there's multiple sets of points that make up one circle. So ladies and gentlemen, that is a basic set of a circle. So the center, of course, is the very middle. That's what I told you. The radius is going to be from the center all the way to the edge of the circle. This is going to be known as your radius. The diameter is going to be all the way across. So all the way across from here all the way to here is going to be known as your diameter. All the way across is your diameter. So half of that is going to be your radius. Okay? Central angle is any angle of the circle that includes the center. So if I was to take this point right here, put a point down here, and draw an angle from the center, if it includes the center, this is known as the central angle. So again, if I was to create this, so I have this point right here to this point right here, this guy right here includes the center. So from here, this is known as a central angle. It's a central angle. It's including the center. Okay? The circumference, whenever I'm talking about the circumference is the distance all the way around. So just like perimeter, circumference is all the way around. Okay? And then lastly on your paper, pi, if I wanted to do pi, we all know pi as 3.14. Correct? But what I want you guys to notice is whenever I talk about pi, you're going to be using pi a lot whenever we deal with circles. Pi is basically the circumference divided by the diameter. So if I took the circumference and divided that by the diameter, that would end up giving me pi. So any circle that you have, if you take the circumference and divide it by the diameter, you would in return get pi. So the next thing we're going to talk about on top of 6.1 circles over there is something called the arc addition postulate. So if you guys don't know, the arc is basically any arc on the outside of the circle. That's known as an arc. So we know it's an arc. It's basically arcing. And so whenever I talk about the addition postulate, that means whenever I combine two arcs together, I'm basically going to add those together. So for instance, if I wanted to find the measurement of x, d, y, so if I wanted to find the measure of arc x, d, and y, I would take arc xd and I would add arc dy together. Does that make sense to everybody? And so that means the arc addition postulate is basically you're adding two arcs together to equal one big one. So what we're going to do is we are going to figure out all the measurements of all these different arcs right here on this circle to help us to figure this out. So one thing that you guys need to know is whenever you're working with circles, the central angle, which I told you guys earlier, an angle that includes the center is going to be the same measure of the arc. So right now this central angle down here is 56 degrees. So that means the arc between D and X, between these 2 points, is going to be 56 degrees. Okay? And it's the same way the other way around. So right now in between Y and D, the arc measure is 40 degrees. So that means the central angle that goes in between these 2 points right here is also going to be 40 degrees. Okay? You with me on that? So look here, 40 and 56, those would add up to equal 96. So if you look here, these two lines crossing each other, these two angles right here would be vertical angles. So that means this guy right here would be 96 degrees. You with me? Okay? So then that means the arc between M and W would be 96 degrees as well. Okay? From Y to W, that's going to be half of a circle, so that's going to equal 180 degrees. So if I did 180 minus 96, so 4 more would give me 100, and then 80 more, so that means this angle right here would be 84 degrees. So that means this angle down here would also be 84 degrees. So then, the central angles are 84, so the arc is 84. Central angle is 84, so the arc is 84. So now that we know the measurements of the arcs by looking at the central angles, now we can figure out the different arc measurements here. So let's go and look at this. So we want to find the measure of arc X and Y. So I'm going to go from X to Y. So now what I want you guys to look at is, whenever I say X and Y, I could be referring to the way all the way around. But whenever there's just two letters, you're going to be dealing with the shortest distance. So from X to Y, if I add 56 and 40 together, that's going to give me 96 degrees. Okay? Alright, so now look here. The measurement of dxm. So that means I'm combining d and x together and x and m together. So let's go and look at this. So right now, arc d to x is going to be 56 degrees. And then x to m, so if I went from x all the way to m, 84 and 96 is going to give me 180 degrees. So then if I ended up adding these two together, so 180 plus 50 would end up giving me 130, plus 6 would give me 236 degrees. Okay? Okay, so now let's look at y, m, and w here. So y, m, and w. So I'm going to go from y to m. So from y all the way to m would be 84 degrees. And then I'm going to add from m to w. So from m to w would give me 96 degrees, which if I added these two together would give you 180 degrees. Okay? Remember, if I just had two letters, m and w, that's going to be the shortest distance. So I'm going to go from m to w. That's the shortest distance. So m to w is only going to be 96 degrees. And then lastly, I'm going to do xm to y. So remember, we're adding two together using the addition postulate. So I'm going to go from x to m, and I'm going to go the shortest distance. So x to m is actually going to be 180 degrees. Plus, and then I'm going to go from m to y, which is 84 degrees. Okay? So 180 and 80 is going to give me 260, plus 4 is going to give me 264 degrees. So ladies and gentlemen, this is the arc addition postulate. So the next thing we're going to talk about is something called arc length. So earlier, whenever we were doing the arc addition postulate, we were dealing with arc measure, which was talking about the degree. So every time you have a central angle, that degree is going to be the same measure as the arc. But you guys have to realize when we're talking about length, I mean the actual physical length. So if you had this circle and you were to actually physically measure out the measurement of the arc, what would be the length? So when I'm talking about length, I need the physical measurement. And the way you find that is by finding basically a fraction of the circumference. So I know all the way around the circle there's a certain length, and the way I find that is by doing the circumference. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the measurement of an arc, find the ratio of it out of 360 degrees, and then I'm basically going to multiply those together to find how much of that circle is going to be of the circumference. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you an example of how to find this. So we are finding the actual length of the measurement of ADB. So if I look here going from A to D to B, this is the length that I want to find. So right now, this is going to be 150 degrees, so I know the measure of this is going to be 150 degrees, correct? So now I need to find the measure of this whole thing here. I know a circle is 360 degrees total, so to find the measure of ADB, I have to do 360 minus 150, which is going to give me 210 in return. So this whole arc right here is going to be 210 degrees total. So what I want to do now is I want to find the length of that by using this formula. So I'm going to do the measurement of the arc. So my arc measure is 210 degrees, right? So I'm going to do 210 divided by how much a full circle is 360. And what this is going to do is it's going to give me a ratio. and then I'm going to multiply that by the circumference. So in this situation, I've been given the radius, so I need to use the formula from earlier, which is 2 pi times the radius, which is going to give me 18. And if you'll look over here right in the corner, it tells me, it wants me to find the length in terms of pi. So what I'm going to do now is you're just going to forget about the pi symbol and multiply everything else. So if I actually took my calculator and I multiplied out 210 times 2 times 18 and multiplied everything through, your thing would then come out to be 21 pi. If I actually multiplied everything out and left the pi alone, your whole thing would come out to be 21, and then I would just tack the pi on in at the end. So ladies and gentlemen, this is a brief example on how to find the actual length. So if I wanted to find the decimal, I would just multiply this out to give me the length. So the next thing we're going to talk about is something called circumference. You guys should have learned this earlier in your math days, but we're just going to do this real quick and kind of retouch base on it. So there's two different ways you can find circumference, and they're both going to give you the same thing. So if you're given the radius of a circle, you can find circumference by doing 2 pi times r. There goes that pi symbol we talked about earlier. Or if you're given the diameter, all you have to do is going to do the diameter times pi, or you just do pi times diameter. It's the same thing. So we're going to go and look at both of these. So right now, on this example, I'm given the radius, so I need to use this to find my circumference. So I'm going to do circumference is going to be 2 pi times the radius, which is 3. So I'm just going to end up putting those together. So there's going to be some questions that are going to ask by doing it in terms of pi. Some of them are going to ask just to do it as a decimal. So I'm going to do it in terms of pi first. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to forget about the pi symbol and multiply everything else. So 2 times 3 is going to end up giving you 6. So in terms of pi, your answer would be 6 pi. But if I actually took this and typed it in the calculator and multiplied it out, you would end up getting 18.84 would be what it would be in a decimal form. Okay? Now the other way you can look at this is by doing the diameter. So if you're given the diameter of a circle, all you have to do is the diameter times pi. That's all you have to do. So I'm going to take circumference here, and I'm going to do the diameter, which is 12 all the way across, and all I got to do is multiply it times pi. So right here, this is going to be the answer in terms of pi. But if I actually multiply this out, I got it right here, you would get 37.69. And this would be your answer as a decimal. So again, ladies and gentlemen, there's two different ways you can find circumference. If you're given the radius, 2 pi r. If you're given the diameter, all you have to do is the diameter times pi.